Welcome back to the Tapes Archive podcast, where we release interviews that have never been heard before. In this episode, we have our second of 3 interviews with drummer Neal the Professor Peart of the band Rush. At the time of this interview in 1991, he was 39 years old and was out on tour with Geddy and Alex in support of the band's 14th studio album, Roll the Bones. In the interview, Neal talks about how he has become comfortable with a random universe, the strength of the individual, talking philosophy with his friends, and how he convinced the band to add a rap to one of their songs. Sadly, as most of you know, we lost this amazing human on January 7th, 2020. As always, we have music critic Mark Allen at the helm conducting the interview. If you'd like to support the show, please like, follow, and subscribe to us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. There, we post other content and information not available on the podcast. If you'd like to read the transcripts for any of our episodes, please head over to our website at thetapesarchive.com. We'll jump into the interview after a quick word from our sponsors. The Tapes Archive is proud to be sponsored by the true crime documentary Dead Man's Line.
You've got 100 armed officers around here trying to get a shot at me. I dared them to shoot me. I didn't go down there to be a buffoon. I went down there for vengeance. And by God, I'll have vengeance.
In 1977, Tony Kuritzis kidnapped a mortgage broker and held him captive for 3 days. For the first time ever, the media was able to cover the event live. To some, Tony was a hero. To others, he was a crazed thug. Dead Man's Line, the true story of Tony Kuritzis.
This award-winning film is available exclusively on Amazon Prime. One last thing before we get to the interview, the Tapes Archive podcast is a proud member of Osiris Media, a global community connecting passionate fans with podcasts and experiences about artists and topics you love. Thanks for tuning in, and now it's time to open the vault.
Neal Peart calling from Rush.
Hi, how you doing?
Not bad. How about you?
Oh, good. Where are you today?
I'm at the bottom of an arena in Hamilton, Ontario.
Uh-huh.
Pre-tour rehearsal.
Okay, when does the tour start?
Friday night.
Last time we talked, you seemed a little bit hesitant about going out on the road again, and now you're right back out on the road, which kind of surprised me. But
it's one of those true dilemmas. That's better to do it or not to do it, you know. And last time my decision was very pragmatic in a sense that I felt, well, if the band is going to be vital, we've got to be playing live. So if I'm going to be in the band, I got to be playing live. Where this time it is more of a sense of excitement about it all. We were really psyched on the record, and we were keen to get out touring and give it the best shot possible because of our media situation. You know, it is really the only thing we can count on as far as exposure or even letting people know we even have a record. So that's a big part of it. But the vitality part, I think, still is very relevant. I think for a band to be growing and for them to be truly a band, you've got to be out playing live, like it or not. So that's part of it, too.
Well, what do you mean your media situation?
Well, just the fact that we can never count on airplay or certainly video play, or even a level of acceptance is something we don't take for granted. So we never take it for granted that we'll put out a record if so many 100,000 people will buy it. We kind of figure, well, maybe nobody will. So our plans are always based upon that.
Well, why do you suppose that is? I mean, you guys have been around for a long time. You obviously have a good fan base. And,
it's a good, healthy attitude to have, though, I think. And plus, it's a lesson that you learn very early on, you know, in the first few records, and we'd be so excited about them when we finish them, and, we can't wait till the world hears this. The universe is going to change in its tracks. And you have such high hopes for it and everything, and when they aren't realized, I think you just learn that kind of hesitancy to take anything for granted. And like I say, I think it's a good lesson to learn. But unfortunately, it comes out about at the expense of disillusionment at that time.
Yeah, I would think that it kind of gives you a us against the world kind of feeling. No?
Yeah, although it's more just pure apprehension rather than thinking, there's no adversary about it, really, unless the adversary is us, I suppose.
Oh, okay.
But I think there are plenty of examples of bands who have had certainly one great selling record and then after that not so much, or people who have been away too long and they suddenly disappear from people's interest. So you see those things happen with other bands, and even in cases with people that I like, suddenly they're just not popular, and trying to explain it is pretty difficult, really. Obviously, no one knows those things, or there'd be a lot more formulaic music.
So you really think about this stuff? I'm I'm just surprised.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, again, just It's not a big issue at all, but just there's a kind of that apprehension when the record is released, like, is anybody going to want to hear it? And then when the tour comes along, is anybody going to want to see us? You know, I think you have to carry that question inside yourself. But it's a defense mechanism, so therefore it isn't something I lay awake nights worrying about by any means, but it's just a reality that I think I am always aware of. And then, but there's a positive side to that, because when the record did come out and did well this time, for instance, I was really pleased. And that the concert sales so far have been really strong, so I got very excited about that, because I hadn't taken it for granted. So when it did happen, it was a source of joy. So.
But it's never been a case where you've put out a record and nobody's bought it, or it's...
Well, the first ones, like I said, it's an early lesson that you learn, I think, as a young musician, even before that, in garage band level, when somebody's telling you, oh, I got you a gig next week, and then it doesn't materialize, and then your manager says, oh, I think I got your recording contract, and then it doesn't materialize, you know. It's what I went through when I was first asked to join this band. The manager told me, oh, yes, they've got a U.S. recording contract, and they're doing a tour. I didn't believe a word of it. You know, I'd heard it all before. So that's an example, again, of I just said, okay, you know, I'll come along and play with the guys and see how it goes, but I don't believe any of that stuff. And I think, like I said, a lesson learned so early, you remain disillusioned forever. So it's okay. Like I say, in our case, it's much more positive that way than it would be the other case. And our first few records, we had some disappointments where the world didn't react quite as strongly as we had felt they would. Like I say, you just can't predict it, so you dare not take it for granted, I suppose.
With the new record, it sounds to me like lyrically, like you feel that you've caught on to some greater truth.
I'm not sure about that. I think I've become comfortable with a random universe, really, which was, of course, the basic theme of the whole record, is trying to deal with that and take the futility out of it and try to analyze, again, some of the things we've just been talking about. Why do really good records not become successful, and why do certain musicians not have more successful careers, and why are some people born into a starvation camp? You know, all those questions, yes, you have to ask. I don't think I've grabbed any enormous truth, except perhaps that some of the questions are wrong. And one of the things in the song Roll the Bones, where I address the ultimate question, why are we here, it seems to me to be the wrong question. In every case, it's not why we're here, what can we do about it is the important thing. So to me, the answer, we're here because of the process of evolution, and et cetera. It's brought it up to you and me being born. There's no sense questioning that. As far as I'm concerned, I'm quite happy to accept that as being the outcome of a random universe. Just the chances of the primal ooze, and from that time forward, have carried us up to now. But the question is, with you and I being born and the society in which we're in, what can be done about it? You know, or the other question in that song is, why does it happen? When I'm talking about these children that are born that way, or children born with AIDS, it's a reality in the world that I have to think about, and faith isn't enough of an answer for me, so I have to say, well, it just happens. It's the evolution of the world and everything, in the Hitchhiker at the End of the Universe sense. But you know, like I say, I just think that's the wrong question. Again, why does it happen isn't the right question either. It's what can we do about it? How can we help?
Yeah, the message that I was getting was, it was, you know, one that basically try hard, do your best, and make the most of what you have.
Yeah, that's something I've been touting for a long time, though. I think has always been the strength of will and the strength of the individual. But again, those aren't laws either. And one of the things that I had to address, and if you read the little bio piece that I did,
oh yeah,
I was saying in there that yes, these things are tendencies in life, that if you work hard, you can create the conditions for a good opportunity to happen and carry you into success. But obviously, that doesn't always happen, and there are just chances of you driving along and you get in a car accident, or somebody runs over you. One of the songs has the line about a drunk in a stolen car. And that kind of random occurrence can happen to anyone, anytime. So again, the randomness of it all can be frightening, and I part of the frontier of modern science now is getting into chaos and fractals, and the whole idea that beneath the seeming order of the universe, as we've tried to define it, it's really just chaos. And it's frightening to try to form yourself a modus vivendi in the middle of seeming chaos. So I think you have to just juggle with those things and say, well, I'll improve my odds the best I can, and also live to the point there, if every day has to be my last one, I could be satisfied with that. You spent your life up till now as well as you could, so there's really no regrets, except that you don't get any more.
I think the reason numbers were created was to make some order out of all the chaos that's around. You know?
It's an essential human need, I think, for order. You know, it's part of the reason why there is organized politics, why there's organized education, why there's religion, certainly, is the earliest one, where out on the savannah, people tried to create some sense of order and say that those stars up there there must be a reason, and they must have an effect on us, and they measured their lives by the stars, so therefore the stars probably became the first god. And then the animals around them and nature became a force that had to be dealt with, so they could impose an order on it and say, well, my wife didn't get eaten by that dinosaur out of randomness. It was the great evil god of dinosaurs, and they could make themselves feel better, I suppose. So all of that thinking kind of went into it, but in an unspoken way. It was just all the process of analysis I had to go through in order to refine down the few words that I get to speak my piece.
I don't know if you get a lot of mail over the lyrics that you write, but I have a feeling you'll get probably more from this album than you have from anything that I can think of that you've
I've been
done.
having some good arguments with my friends, I can tell you that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, what do they say?
Oh, just raising philosophical questions. A circle of friends who are also interested in the same kind of things I am. So one friend of mine, for instance, remarked on the "Why are we here? Because we're here" line that it bothered him a bit because it sounded like something his father would say, like if he asked, well, why can't I do that? Because I said so. Well, why is that like that? Because it is. Sounded like a simple answer that way, when in fact, to me, it was, again, a whole process of thought refined down into a simple answer that was meant to deflect it to another question. Also, the question of existentialism was raised, too. Is this just an existential thing where we're just here and it doesn't make any sense and there's no reason and there's no reality and all that, which I do reject. I think there is an objective reality, and I believe in an evolutionary chain of events, but I don't believe in a divine force controlling those events. So, like I say, it makes for some dizzying conversations, because all you end up with at the end, of course, is a headache, just speaking for thousands of years. I've been chewing over these questions, too, but it doesn't make them boring, to me.
No, and in a world full of love songs and sex songs and nonsense songs, it's nice to actually have something that will spur some discussion. So.
It's an angle that I've been trying to get more at with lyrics, is getting away from preaching and getting more into raising questions and saying, well, here's what I've been thinking about, and allow a point of access for the listener to inviting them, well, what do you think about it? And trying to be much less didactic and much more just intriguing, if you like, just trying to bring up the intrigue of the question and play with it myself, but always leave room for someone else's thought.
I think my favorite line is, I was lined up for glory, but the tickets sold out.
Yeah. Yeah, I always like metaphors that are drawn, of course, from our profession.
Right. That seems to happen to a lot of people, I mean, they think that they're all ready for it, and it's not there when they go to look for it. I mean, I see that in a lot of local bands and things like that. People who just they're just waiting. They're kind of like I guess the metaphor would be sitting at the drugstore, Schwab's, waiting to be discovered. That's or something like that.
And the reaction to that is what's important too, because so often it's somebody else's fault. And that's a thing I raised in the first verse of the song "Roll the Bones," where if people get lucky and are successful, it's not because of luck. But if they get unlucky and aren't successful, it is because of luck. That's another common dichotomy in human nature, too, that really interests me, because those same sayings that someone who's been successful, someone will call him lucky and say, well, the harder I work, the luckier I get. And again, it's a tendency, but it's certainly not a law. And on the converse of that is someone who's had a difficult time for whatever reason, and usually character-oriented, in my opinion, but at the same time, to them it's always, well, they didn't get the break.
I could almost accept that, except in that sense, how do you explain Vanilla Ice?
Luck.
Yeah. He was lucky.
Yeah. But he wouldn't say that.
No, I'm sure he would say he worked hard, but...
Yeah, well, that's, again, I tried to use that dichotomy in the song, that winners take the praise of saying that, they worked hard for it, but losers never take that blame. Right place at the right time, really.
Yeah.
That explains so many of them. I mean, Milli Vanilli, how do you justify any of them? And I get even more annoyed at the calculated ones with pretense. I mean, to me, Vanilla Ice isn't so offensive because he's not pretending to be anything else. It's the ones that are just as formulaic, but pretend to be rebels and pretend to be rock and roll outlaws with leather jackets and everything. But at the same time, they're at least as formulaic as Vanilla Ice ever is. So they tend to annoy me much more than true pop group. That doesn't offend me because it's just what it is.
Do you have anybody in mind there?
Well, I mean, the whole light metal syndrome, the metal moose, that was all very calculated to create an image of rebellion, when at the same time the record company was pulling the strings and telling them what songs to record and how to record them, and the whole thing was just a complete factory, but it was given the guise of being rebellion. And George Michael's another example, too. He's not content with just being a pop star. He has to pretend to be something more.
Light metal, are we talking like Poison, Warrant, stuff like that, or...
Yeah, Bon Jovi, I think, is a pretty good example.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Okay. And one of the, obviously, the new areas you're exploring on the record is rap. How's that gone over?
Well, as you'll understand, I think from a writing point of view, I want to do it because it's so much fun. Yeah. I was hearing some of the better rap music, and I was thinking that... when it is creative, it's a lot of fun to do. So I actually gave the song to the guys without that section, and then later came to them. I have this little thing, and tell me what maybe this is crazy, but tell me what you think about it. Unfortunately, they were open enough to be experimental with it, so it got used. But we weren't sure how to handle it, really. We liked the idea of it, and we were interested in doing it, but we thought, well, should we get a real rapper to do it? We even experimented with using a female voice, just to give a different slant on it, because we didn't want it to be satire, but at the same time we didn't want it to be a hokey imitation. And then in the final analysis, through all the experiments, we had the treated version of Geddy's voice seemed to have the right persona of a very cool, laid-back person just delivering this little speech. And it seemed to work the best also sonically, where if you just listen to the song go by, it was more pleasing to listen to.
Yeah, I wondered if that was his voice. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, well, it's beautifully treated in that it's harmonized, but it's not slowed down, so the phrasing remains the same rhythmically. Mm-hmm. So it's quite sophisticated technologically how it was done, but in the final analysis, too, when he was delivering it, he was hearing the affected voice, so he tended to adopt the persona of that voice. Mm-hmm. So it seemed to be the most successful way to put it across.
Let's talk about heresy for a bit. I thought that was a real interesting approach to what has happened in Eastern Europe over the past few years. It seems to me that I'm wondering, you raise a lot of questions there. Like you said, you're raising questions more these days. I'm wondering, should anybody pay? Can anybody pay?
No, that's the sad part of it. Whenever a huge mistake has been perpetrated like that on the human race, or certainly the events in Europe of the late 30s were another example, where war crime trials and all that are one thing, but it doesn't really correct the problem. It doesn't, all those people's lives are not improved or returned to them. And that was the aspect of it that bothered me. And the question that I had to raise was, do we have to be forgiving? I suppose we do, because there's nothing else to do, although forgiveness is not really the right response, because it's the enormity of the crime against so many lives, to me, is mind-boggling, although that seemed to be completely ignored in the euphoria of the moment. People were glad, obviously, and so they should be. They were glad to be free. Free at last was the phrase. At the same time, I couldn't help looking at the last 80 years and 4 generations of people in Eastern Europe and throughout Soviet Russia whose lives had been unnecessarily made worse, or in some cases ended, just because of a bad idea. It seems so ludicrous, but that's what it was.
Are there any plans to tour over there? Because I would be very interested to hear how they react to a song.
Yeah, we're very keen to get Berlin on the tour this time, just because we've never been there. But as far as touring in Eastern Europe, we could really keep ourselves so busy just in North America that for us, we get over to Western Europe every second tour, basically. And we probably will be there next spring, but I don't think we'll try to play explorers and head off to Romania and Bulgaria and stuff. I've traveled through some of those places on my own and would certainly do so again, but working in a place is no way to see it, for one thing, and for another thing, if we have to work, I'd rather work under the best possible circumstances rather than make do. So I'll travel under horrible circumstances, but I'd rather work under close to perfect.
Good plan. A couple other things, I'll let you go. Last time we talked, you were exploring art museums of the U.S. How did that go?
Very well. Actually, I plan to continue that facet of my education on this tour, too. But it gave me something really interesting to do on the last tour that also gave me a sense of accomplishment at the end of it, which touring doesn't always lend to me these days. So I did learn a lot about American painting and plus visited a lot of great museums. So, like I say, I plan to continue that.
Was there anything special that sticks out in your mind that you saw?
So much. I mean, nearly every day I was at the local city's art museum, but just a real love for American painting that I hadn't been exposed to before. I'd seen a lot of Canadian and a lot of European, and it was just kind of a hole in my art education. So as far as, do you mean particular people or eras?
Particular paintings or people or museums or anything like that?
Gee, so many great ones in unexpected places. Richmond, Virginia, for instance, has a fabulous art museum that I wouldn't have expected. Columbus has a really nice one, too. The style, I really like the 20s and 30s sort of post-impressionist Impressionist style of paintings. I think going to the Chicago Art Institute and seeing the Edward Hopper's Nighthawks.
Yeah.
That's one that I really love. So seeing it for real was a real treat.
You don't happen to know where you went when you were in Indianapolis, do you?
I don't think I had time. Actually, the last museum I went to in Indianapolis was the Indy 500 one.
Oh. I see. Okay, so another part of your education, yeah. And you had mentioned that you had been writing a lot of prose at the time. Are you still working on prose?
Yes. In fact, that was one of the things I had to sacrifice for the sake of this tour this fall. One of my projects was going to be another prose project. But yeah, I mentioned I do a lot of traveling around the world, and most of it by bicycle. So I tend to collect my impressions while I'm on a trip like that, and then put it into prose afterward, just for friends and fellow travelers, but with a view toward learning how to do it and learning the craft. So again, I'm happy with the time spent, and feel that I've learned a lot about it. So I'm happy to do it on my own, really, and not in the public eye. It's one good comparison with lyrics is that I did it all my growing up in public, so to speak.
Right.
All my lyrics from when, to my mind, I was a little kid. All those songs are still out there. Where prose, even from a couple of years ago, it makes me wince now, just as early lyrics do. So I'm really glad that the prose I can do on my own and hopefully work up to a level that I will feel that I can share it.
Finally, I'm not sure if we talked about this last time. Are you married?
Yeah.
Yeah. What kind of music did you have played at your wedding? I know this is a goofy question.
Oh, I never had a wedding.
Oh, you didn't have a wedding?
No.
Oh, okay. All right.
Just part of the individualist ethics, that you're not allowed to have anybody else tell you're married. So we stayed away from church and state.
Oh, okay. So it's common law more than anything.
Yeah.
I see. I've been just asking people because I always think you have a wedding. If professional musicians have a wedding, what kind of music would they play that would possibly be entertaining or interesting enough for them to want to hear?
Yeah, really, and there isn't a lot of choice.
So,
we had the Carpenters.
Anything else you want to tell people about the tour or the album or what you're up to?
Gee, there's so much to say when a question like that comes up. I hardly know where to begin. I consider myself a pawn in the hand of the interviewer. But the tour has been very much restructured in the visual sense. It's completely new, which pleases us. And musically also, it's a lot of old and new things have been woven into it. And we have the mother of all medleys in our show now, that we've taken bits and pieces of songs that we haven't played for years and years, and we'd take the parts that we still like, or some songs that we had to drop this time to make room for new ones. If there was a part of it that we liked, we'd keep it and throw it in this monster medley. So we have a medley now that's longer than some bands' set, I think.
And are you still doing Red Barchetta?
No, actually, that was one of the unfortunate sacrifices, but we kept part of it.
Oh, okay. So that'll make it in the medley?
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, and even songs from the first and second album that we haven't played for literally 10 years, we scavenged some bits and pieces of, so we created a real monster, but it gives us a lot of pleasure, so I think it might the audience too.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time. Always fun to talk to you, and I'll see you when you're here.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mark.
Take care. Bye.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Tapes Archive podcast. Please remember you can always find more information about the show and the individual episodes at our website, thetapesarchive.com. Until next time, the vault is closed.